Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to continue along the journey through the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Today, talking about Chapter 12, The Law of Least Effort. If you guys remember last time, we started off Chapter 11, and we talked about this whole third law of habit formation, which is, again, making it easy. If you guys remember, the first law, make it obvious. The second law, make it attractive. Third law that we are going to be talking about in these subsequent chapters, make it easy. And then the last law, make it satisfying. So last time we talked about how practice is the key to habit formation. And rather than maybe call it practice, we should call it repetition. And we talked about how you can get stuck in a mode of just planning. And planning will never fully crystallize habits. You need to put things into action. Same thing what we've talked about in different books, especially in with Winning in Mind. We talked about the subconscious mind and how you need to practice repetitive behaviors so that when you need to utilize them in competition, as in an example of sports, that they just become automatic to you. And that's kind of what James was talking about in the last chapter. Well, today we're talking about this concept of the law of least effort. Now, what is the law of least effort, you might say? Well, let's just kick things off. So, James starts off by talking about a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. And this is a book I've heard actually a lot about. Someday I would like to read it at one point. But he talks about this book because it exemplifies the law of least effort. So in the book, James highlights that there is a section of the book talking about how different continents have different shapes. And the shapes greatly affected those that lived on those continents. So the axes of North America run pretty much north to south. So it's kind of a longer continent than it is wide. Now, that's completely different from Europe or Asia, where the continent stretches more east to west. And this has a profound impact on human behavior, as outlined by James in this book, Gun, Germs, and Steel. So they talk about how agriculture tended to spread more easily on an east to west axis, because as you go from east to west, you're going along the same, what would that be, longitude, right? Or latitude. Is it the same latitude? But you're going across the globe horizontally. And as you go across the globe or land horizontally, you're facing climates that are similar as they are in other areas on that same horizontal line from east to west. So farmers had an easier time domesticating crops and spreading them across the land. This, again, leads to increases in food production, which leads to population growth. Then you're able to get more people for armies. You have stronger armies. Then you're able to overtake other lands, and et cetera, et cetera. But trying to grow things and spread agriculture from a north to south is a lot more challenging. Because you think about it like this, and he outlines this in the book. Try to grow oranges in Florida, okay, pretty easy. But you try to grow oranges in Canada, well, it's a different story. You can't grow the same thing, so it becomes a little more challenging. And maybe this might explain why, there's population booms in this earlier time period of Europe versus in the Americas, maybe. So how does this really exemplify the law of least effort? Well, if you think about it, what's the least amount of effort to spread the agriculture? Well, the least amount of effort is if you go from east to west. You are going to have a more easier time growing food if you just go from east to west in those similar climate ranges versus if you try to take oranges and try to grow them again in New York City or something like that. So this exemplifies the law of least effort, which is gravitating towards the path that requires the least amount of work, because energy is precious and scarce. So the more energy a habit requires, the less likely you are to do it. And it's not to say that it's like this every time, because it's going to be easy to do things in the very beginning when you are, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about a new habit, or you do something first thing in the morning when you have a ton of energy. But now what happens if you don't do it in the morning and you do it kind of later at night? All of a sudden you don't have the same energy. Or all of a sudden, after a few weeks of being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about a brand new habit that you're doing, all of a sudden your motivation starts to wane a little bit. So companies know this. James highlights. Companies know how to utilize this and how to utilize this for maybe not the most desirable behavior. So think about stuff like phone scrolling on your phone, or flipping through channels or Netflix shows, or doom scrolling Twitter. Every habit steals a ton of time because they have no effort. This is the path of least effort. They're making it effortless to get news or to get, quick content by just the scroll of your thumb. Now, if there was a ton of friction, or if it was very difficult to do this, would people take part in these activities? You got to ask yourself that. So James talks about how it's not about picking easy habits. It's about making the hard habits as easy as possible. So the habits that have a ton of meaning, or they're going to bring a lot of benefit and positivity to your life, how do you make those as easy as possible? How do you get rid of obstacles, create less friction, make them more straightforward, so that it's easy to pick up those hard habits? So next section here, how to achieve more with less effort. And a great way, again, to exemplify the example that I was just talking about in that last slide on, how do we make the hard things easier? Well, think about a garden hose. So when you put a bend in the garden hose, when you fold it up, right, not much water is going to flow through at the other end when it gets turned on. We've all kind of maybe done this as a kid, or you've done this to a sibling who's wondering like, hey, no water's coming out. And then you find out like you've bent the hose in a certain fashion. So how do you get water to flow? Well, you can do a couple things. You can either turn the water to like its maximum. And yeah, I mean, that would work maybe a little bit. You'd get a little bit of water out. But think about the amount of energy that is required to do that. Why not just remove the bend? Why not just remove the friction? And that way you don't have to use so much energy. You don't have to turn the water on all the way to its maximum. So you have to think like this when going through and conducting or trying to create new and positive habits for yourself. Trying to get motivated is like trying to force the water through the bend. It's going to, after a while, be exhausting. And what we want to do is we just want to remove the bend. So one way we do this, and we've talked about this previously a little bit with environmental cues, is you can environmentally audit your space around you. And you can make it so that the habits are very, very obvious and they're very, very easy to do. And essentially, you're kind of conducting here the first law that we talked about, which is to make it obvious. So after coffee, I read for 30 minutes, and we talked about those certain mantras or the manifestations that you come up with where you can habit stack and you can do something right after something, right? That's kind of one way to make it frictionless. That's kind of one way to get your body and your mind prepared to do something. But going one step further is not going out of your way to do something. So if to make something obvious and to make it very easy to do, and to say, hey, after coffee, I'm going to read for 30 minutes, that's a great first step. But to make it frictionless, to make it easy, why not put the book that you're supposed to read right there next to the coffee maker? So now you don't even have to think about it. You're not even going out of your way. You just get up make your coffee, and then the book's right there. That's what we talk about here with making things frictionless and putting less obstacles in the way of those good habits. So the flip side of this is by removing things and by creating friction. And I think we're going to talk about that in a couple slides, but essentially, again, you're removing the barriers to those good, positive habits. And again, companies know how to do this. Think about rideshare apps. They remove the friction of getting in a car and traveling somewhere and having to create and have an organized logistical plan. Rideshare app, you just call Uber, let somebody know that you need a ride, and they come pick you up. You don't have to worry about anything else. Same thing with a meal delivery service. Oh, you don't have to worry about gathering ingredients, the recipes, the steps, etc. Nope. It takes all of that out of the way. Same thing with online dating. You don't have to worry about, putting on your Sunday best and going out. Hey, post up a few pictures of yourself on this platform, and then you can meet people and successfully set up a date from there, which you can use a rideshare app to get to that date. So you see how these companies know how to remove the friction from these habits so that it makes them easier to do. So again, to go along with this, how can we get things ready for us, and how can we make things easier in this habit formation? Well, one way is you reset the room. And this was something that James talks about from this gentleman, Oswald Knuckles, in Natchez, Mississippi, here in the U.S. And he had this term, he's kind of developed this term of resetting the room, where every time you finish something, you put it back to the way it was. Whether it's, if you're eating dinner, you clean up the table. If you're watching TV, you put the couch and the pillows back and the blankets all folded up in the same spot, etc., etc. And yes, this helps to keep your house nice and tidy, but also it reduces friction for the next time you go and you do that action again in that environment. So this can be both done for positive and negative behaviors. So like I said, to make things easy for positive behavior, let's say, hey, I want to get up tomorrow and I'm going to work out. Why not, before you go to bed, you set out your workout clothes, you get your protein shake in the fridge, you have your water bottle set ready to go. That way, when you get up, you don't even have to think about, oh, I have to get ready, oh, I have to prepare this, oh, I got to get breakfast ready. No, everything's laid out for you and it's primed and ready to go. That's what we're talking about with making things easy. Now, the reverse of that, to get rid of a bad habit or a negative habit, well, make it harder to do it. So if you have a problem just, doom scrolling on your phone, well, have a loved one maybe hide your phone for an hour first thing in the morning. That way you can use that first hour in the morning to do some work. If TV is your vice, well, every time you finish watching TV, unplug the TV, take out the batteries. Make it just a little bit more inconvenient, so that when you want to watch TV, it's just a little bit inconvenient. And maybe instead of watching that TV, you pick up the book. So that's going to do it, guys. Again, to summarize, we've got the law of least effort, which is gravitating towards the option that requires the least amount of work. So we want to create an environment where it's very easy to do the right thing. It doesn't take a lot of work to do the right thing. And by the opposite, if you want to not participate in certain habits, don't make it easy. Make it very difficult to do that bad habit. So when the friction to behaviors is low, habits become easy, and you start doing those habits all the time because, hey, that's very easy to do. There's a path of least resistance. And again, and like in that bullet point, increase the friction for bad behaviors. But all in all, it kind of comes down to something we talked about earlier in the book, which is priming the environment so that future actions are more readily available. And again, you can do this by just preparing that environment for the day in advance. Hey, you've got a big project that you need to do. Well, make sure the laptop's charged, make sure it's sitting on your desk or right next to the coffee in the morning. Make sure, breakfast is maybe not, you can meal prep, and I do love doing that, so that way you don't even have to think about breakfast. It doesn't take you that much time. Or you can set out your plates and the cookware right there in the morning so you can just do breakfast really quick, and then the computer is right there at the dinner table. Right after you finish breakfast, do your work. It's all about carving this path of least resistance, of least effort. And that's how we're going to make habits easy. Thank you guys so much for listening. Really, really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll be back next time, continuing with chapter 13. Really enjoying this book so far, and thank you guys for following with me on this journey through this book. So thank you guys very much. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.